excited to be here with you today. I'm super stoked. I was thinking so much about what radical collaboration means, and I was mulling over it and realized it really comes back to how we communicate. That is the linchpin for whether or not we're able to communicate and connect really, really effectively with others. So today, I've anchored my time with you all around how we communicate and connect. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to Ben for the invitation. I'm excited. So a quick hello. My name is Kim Williams, and I spent the first part of my career focused on PR, advertising, and basically brand narrative, and how do you help brands cultivate that narrative. And then now, more recently, focused on product design, specifically focused on brand systems. So how do the systems work? How do we think about creating cohesive end-to-end product portfolios, which is a pretty gnarly thing to do. And I've learned a lot of tough lessons about communication along the way that I'll be sharing. On a more personal note about who I am, I was born and raised in Jamaica. I came to this country when I was about 7 years old with my family. My mom was one of 14, my dad one of 7, so massive families, both in Jamaica. And within my little unit, I am the youngest of 3, and my brother was always a rebel, breaking out, doing different things, getting in trouble, taking the heat. My sister, middle child, was always the peacemaker, and I was always the instigator. So I was always about stirring the pot, causing some trouble, and I feel like that is the best characterization of my work life. I'm always the pot stirrer and not afraid to be the change agent. And so much about communication and connecting with other people starts first with knowing yourself. And as it comes to work, knowing why you work. Why is it that you do exactly what it is that you do? Specifically, a finer point on it, why do you get out of bed in the morning? What's the reason? For me, I've been thinking about work for a really long time, actually. I was that go-to person within my community. If somebody needed a resume, if somebody wanted to think through their negotiation process, I was the go-to person. I still am. I have like a template for resumes, and I kind of like change the color based on the person that's talking to me. I change the font choice, just like little things to personalize it. But when folks come to me, it's, Kim, help me tell my story, and Kim, help me figure out what are all the opportunities before me. And so when I think about why I jump out of bed every morning, I think about helping people all over the world tell their best stories through their resumes and find opportunities that they didn't know was possible for them. And then, of course, we all have the laundry list of like previous jobs that we did. This is my laundry list. And there's probably so many more gigs that I've done to get to where I am. And I love that transformation, the journey of what it takes to get to where you are. And full disclosure, that security guard gig, I promise you I wasn't guarding anything. I was like at the bottom of a hotel doing like the late night shift, and all I had was a flashlight. So if anything happened in that Paramus, New Jersey hotel, I would not have been any help. But the more important thing is to choose work with a purpose that aligns with your being. So I'm choosing to work to help people get jobs because that's actually a passion area for me, and I love it. And it also works with who I am as a leader. Like, I focus on unlocking potential. So it works on all of these levels. And it's a bit cliche, but I firmly believe, do what you love. And so when you connect or want to connect with other people, you have to first be grounded in what it is you love, what is it that you believe, what are your core values, and that is the foundation. A part of it is also knowing how you work. We all have different approaches to work. Some of us love Google Docs, some of us love email. I hate email, PS. I'm the worst at email. My whole team knows that I'm email challenged, which means I may not reply sometimes, which I'm just horrible. So we all have different ways of working. And so it's about how do you tailor your day around what you need to do your best work so that you can adjust for any challenges that you have or meet any specific needs. So are you a night owl? Do you need to adjust your days so that you come in a little bit later? Are you an early bird? Do you need to take off a little bit earlier? What's your family dynamic? I have a 3-year-old, so I do want to get home for dinner, or I do want to do the prep in the morning, and I might rotate prep in the morning or dinner. But think through, how is it that you best work? Know your superpowers and your Achilles heels. And sometimes those are actually the same thing. So for me, my superpower is that I'm such an empathetic person, and it's very rare to have an executive that has a high EQ level, and I do, and it's the best thing about me. And there are challenges with having all the feels. You have to know how to filter that, how to categorize it, how to be effective with that, and so knowing what your superpowers are, being able to identify them, and knowing how you can leverage your strengths. There's some great tools out there that can help you plug into more specifically what your superpowers are and how you work. So this one is the Strengths Finder. And what I like about it is it's helpful for mapping who you are at work as well as who you are at home. And so I'm going to try this pointer here. Oh, it's working. So this is who I am at work. And you can see that I lead with this kind of human tone with like the yellows and the greens. But I'm also a director, and I can be analytical. And who I am at home, that's why I'm at work. At home, I'm the exact same person. I just get a little bit more amplified at work. But tools like this are just like so helpful to connect between yourself and your team members. So there's knowing yourself, knowing how you work. Now it's like knowing how your team works. How do you plug into the team that you have? Now I always talk about leadership, this from a leadership perspective, because I build teams and I've been working in that space, but this is also relevant for individual contributors as well. How do you plug into your team? So as a leader, I myself am a campaigner. So using 16 Personalities is a free test. I use it with all of my team members, and it's just a great way to get a good, quick snapshot on who you are. And so I'm a campaigner, which means I'm the ultimate advocate for my team members. And then it's about who I am and knowing my team members, who they are in the office and outside of the office. So Dave Wynn is a phenomenal creative director that's on my team. He just had a baby. So what's his optimum work schedule like? You know, operating with practically no sleep right now. Eddie Liu, who is completely logical, knows the most that more than me, significantly more than I would ever know about front-end engineering, capabilities, prototyping, all of this. And he's getting ready for his wedding, so how does he plan and navigate that while he's at work? Mika loves her niece. She's traveling the world with her niece and is just incredible. She's the protagonist. Anytime I come to Mika with a problem, she looks at me and says, "Kim, how do you feel about this?" She's just so sweet and empathetic. And so what I want to highlight is that we're all different. We all bring different things to the table, and we all balance each other out. No two are alike. And to make it even more fun, we plot ourselves on the Star Wars personality chart as well. So you know yourself, and you know your team. The next part is knowing your partners. And knowing your partners is so important, deeply understanding them. And a great pitch reference point that I got in my days in PR and advertising was always share what it is, why it's important, and then why is it specifically important to your specific audience. So it starts by really, really understanding what's important. So within the context of my specific team, we work horizontally. So we have many different verticals. Those verticals focus on the job seeker audience, or small to medium businesses, or enterprises. There are hosts of different GM structures that are focused on different parts of the business. And our role is to partner with each different GM, understand what their goals are, what their needs are, and more importantly, communicate at their varying altitudes. Communicate to the executive level, working with our CEO, our SVP of marketing, the GMs, and their directors, and also team contributors. So all of these different levels of communication across the entire organization to align and say, how do we come together in a way in which we produce products that work for what you're trying to achieve within your vertical, but then still keep a connective tissue across the board. So, working with each partnership, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve Q3, Q4? What are your biggest pain points? How do they measure success? What does success look like for the partnership team that you're trying to connect with? What are the incentives and inspirations behind that team? So, it's almost like taking that team's goals and mapping back. Where do they want to see themselves at the end of Q3? How do you help? How does partnering with you help them? And more than anything, it's this opportunity to map out the win-win, knowing that it's not a zero-sum game, that you can deeply understand what you want, deeply understand what they want, and communicate at the varying altitudes, executive level, or at the team level, what is that sweet spot for how you connect with your partners. A part of it is also getting to clarity. So making sure that things are absolutely clear with how you connect with your partners. And that really starts with roles and responsibilities. And so you might have within your team roles and responsibilities defined. And you might not. You might have just gone through a reorg and you're figuring that out. That's hard too. But let's say you establish that within your team. Then you have to think through, how does a partner team plug and play into the rhythm that your team has already created with roles and responsibilities? And the reason this is important is that clear roles and responsibilities, when we communicate, equal empowerment. It's very difficult if you approach a partner to say, hey, let's work together on this thing. And if they don't know what you expect from them, if they don't know how you want them to engage, if they don't know what all of these different interaction points are going to be like, they're not going to feel empowered, and it's also like a morale, it's demoralizing. It's hard to engage when you don't know how, and expectations aren't clear. And there are whole hosts of folks that step into what it takes to ship anything, what it takes to get anything out the door. And in your team, you might be wearing many different hats. You might be the designer, illustrator, researcher, product manager. You might have a multitude of different roles. And those roles and responsibilities vary depending on the project. And so it's so important to be really, really crisp on what the expectations are for that project, for that role, for that engagement, for the altitude that you need to communicate at. And so a great tool for this is just a RACI chart. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's essentially walking through the acronym RACI. You've got who's responsible. So who's actually going to be doing the thing? Who's actually going to be working on the project? Who's accountable? So who's the person that's going to delegate, set the parameters? Who's going to define whether or not you've completed what you want to complete? And some folks probably already know this, but I think it's worth reviewing. Who's consulted? Who just contributes to the work? and provides inputs that grounds whether or not you have context for the work. And then who is informed? So who's just going to be kept in the loop? So this finer point on roles and responsibilities, not only for your specific team, but then how do you plug your partners into that RACI model so that they know how to engage with you? Ideally, there's always only one person for each RACI, whether responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Another part of this connection point is who even knows what these words mean? I mean, we use acronyms all the time. JS for job seeker, ICL, Indeed Component Library, ICLC, Indeed Component Library Commons. Like, we use them for shorthand, and they're everywhere. But shorthand gets really confusing when you don't understand what they mean. Patterns, what does that mean? Components, themes, atoms, templates. We use these languages and these words even within the context of our own team, and I can tell we get mixed up all the time. So how can we expect folks outside of our team to understand the messages that we're trying to communicate to affect change when we, even within our own team, are still wrangling with it and still putting a finer tooth on it or finer note on it? To make matters worse, I remember when I first started talking about design systems at Indeed, I introduced design system as a foundation and then talked about the design language as almost a layer on top of the system and thoroughly confused everybody. I had engineers saying, "Are you talking about software? Like, what are you talking, when you say language, what do you really mean?" And so I say all of this to say, it's so important that we speak the same language. Shared glossaries really help. And again, consider the altitude of the message. So who needs to hear what and at what point? As a leader, I sometimes do this a lot. You know, I interface with our executive level and I'm at a really high altitude. Then I like swoop into like a working session and I'm talking and I can just tell the team is like, what is Kim talking about? I think she might legit be crazy. And it's because I didn't adjust the altitude to say, oh, this is a working team. How do I adjust the context that I'm trying to give them so that it's appropriate for where they are within their working session? Be data informed. So think about qualitative, quantitative, and marketing, all of these different data points. Depending on your audience, they might care about one more than the other. It's on us to weave the information together for them so that they understand the value of it and that it meets their needs. So if it's a voice of the customer moment where we've heard something from the customer, can we map that back to some metrics that we found that are resonating with our business partners? And then sometimes, like learning, I was trying to introduce design thinking. And like sometimes we're really precious about the word design, but sometimes that word doesn't resonate. Like designer, what does that mean? Fashion designer, UX designer, architectural designer. It's such a loaded term, and it can also be exclusive. It can, like using that term can also exclude. So I'm saying don't be precious with the words that you use. Rather, use words that are inclusive for your audience at the altitude with which you're communicating. Use words that resonate with your audience at the altitude that you're communicating. And adjust your presentation and delivery for your audience, whether it's executive, director, team level. Just always be that flexible and fluid with your message to reach as many people. Know how to be inclusive and respectful. And so it's so easy to come in at the tail end of something and have feedback about it or try to think through how you can contribute and partner with someone else. And it's just so important to understand the why were choices made? And specifically, understanding the full context of how that team got to the choice that they did, in fact, make. And then also thinking through collaboration. So for us, we're a global team that's distributed all over Austin, San Francisco, Seattle, Tokyo, Singapore. So we've just got all of these different team members everywhere, and how do you stay lock in step? And so for us, sometimes we co-locate, sometimes we are distributed. We have team members that are 100% remote. So be thoughtful about how we include everyone, whether it's something as simple as including a room for another location and not just your own room. Wherever possible, just like think about these little things. And then inclusive collaboration. Some folks need agendas and emails, agendas and calendars to know how they can best prepare for the meeting. Pre-reads for decks, if it's appropriate. Co-creation with documents. How do people best work? Everyone works, learns, and communicates differently. And so that's the point of leaning in and being so attuned to your partners, attuned to yourself, attuned to your team, so that you're adjusting to what people need, and so that you're able to build those bridges. And categorize your rhetoric so that you're adjusting and modulating as necessary. And the way that you do this is by identifying, respecting, and honoring the diversity of your teams and your partners, really respecting what everyone brings to the table, even if it's a different point of view, even if it's one that you don't necessarily agree with, deeply understand so that you can make that connection. Embrace diversity of methods, approaches, personalities. Working in a large organization and even a small organization, you're gonna get different points of view, different personalities. How do you make room for that in a way in which you can be effective with every team? Embrace the challenges of being a change agent. So, like I was saying in the very beginning, I know how to stir the pot. I know what it means to introduce something new, and everybody in this room does. Whether it was a new feature, a new product, a new portfolio, offering, we've all been in the place or in the position of being a change agent. And so it's so important to remember that change agents are almost never fan favorites. Sometimes you have a target on your back for introducing something new, trying something different. And so a part of this partnership is coming from a place of compassion, knowing that you can relate and understand. If somebody's coming at you with a lot of heat and fire, you think through why, what are they going through? What did they go through or experience recently? Or what's the full context of what they were navigating with the launch of their product? Lastly, coming together. So you know yourself, you know your partners. Now it's about bringing it all together. Which starts with alignment, and not just alignment. Once you have a trusting engagement, that's when you can have honest, candid conversations with each other and really push to up-level the work, push higher. So it's not just alignment. I think it really is about breaking through to more. And that starts with creating shared vision, values and principles, objectives, OKRs, and the golden roadmap. If you can get on somebody's roadmap, that is amazing. That's when you know that you're 100% aligned and the work will be shipping. But you don't get to a roadmap synergy, I hate that word, but you don't get to align on a roadmap overnight, The whole point is it takes relationship to get there. It's knowing yourself, deeply understanding your partner and what their needs are to get to that point. And then you start by aligning on the problem, not just the problem that you perceive there to be, rooted in research, rooted in qualitative and quantitative research. Align on who we're solving the problem for. Align on what success looks like for that team, for the partnership, for the company. Align on what the specific outcomes should be. So for systems, for us, 80% of systems are the same. Toggle, a button, they all kind of look the same, but about 20% is what's unique to that brand and what's unique to that product experience. And so for us, we think about systems as beneficial from a value perspective as well as a performance perspective, operational efficiencies from using components and things like that. Map out the cost. What's the investment, time, team, and money? How does that adjust if you don't get the investment that you're looking for from a team or from your manager? Metrics, how will we measure success? Are we all communicating in the same ways about what success looks like? And then how are we prioritizing? And if we're prioritizing this one thing, what are the risks? What are we not prioritizing by pushing this forward? And lastly, decision making, thinking about how those partners at those various altitudes fold back into the RACI. And keeping up with momentum. It's so important with your partnerships to know that every step forward is moving the whole initiative forward. And that starts with transparency and trust by being consistent and always showing up. But sometimes you get to this, what have you done for me lately, point when you're doing a multi-year initiative. And you can mitigate that by consistently demonstrating value. And the way you do that is by cataloging every win and every learning. It's not a failure, it's a learning. What did you learn that's going to propel you forward? And make it a team effort. So make it a team effort for that executive, director, team level to demonstrate the ROI. Communicate consistently. Know that every action keeps you moving forward. And one more thing. We are one body. That's the way I think about it. As you know yourselves, as you know your partners, everyone that you want to connect with, think about it as one body. Your immediate team, the discipline that you're a part of, whether design or PM, the partners that you need to connect with to be effective, to do your cross-functional work, and then lastly, the impact that you're having for your company and the value there. Thank you so much.
We have a lot of questions for you. Okay, we're going to start at the beginning here. Joseph asks, how do you handle a situation where management puts you in a role where you are not strong and expects a strong result?
That's so good. And strength totally depends on the situation, right? Like I might be awesome at this one talent that I'm an expert in, but if you put me in a new scenario, I might not be as strong. So if you're put in that position, you can ask for resources. You can say, here's some tools that I think will help. You can put it back on the manager and say, hey, I'm struggling in these areas. Can you help me navigate this?
That's excellent.
You know?
I love that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does feedback play into your process for building trust? Do you have a feedback process for your team and stakeholders?
Yeah, 100%. So much of trust is the partner feeling heard. You know, if they gave you feedback and you come into the next round and that feedback hasn't been implemented, they don't feel heard, and that immediately breaks trust. So that's at the executive level. At the team level, it's the same thing. If you are providing and giving feedback within your team and that's not being actioned, it's demoralizing. So it's 100% up there with trust.
Okay, perfect. What are some methods that you've used to define roles and responsibilities? How have you communicated them? So you mentioned RACI. I mean, you can go more in depth in that or the other ones, but how have you communicated them?
Yeah, full transparency. Like I stepped into a new role like 3 months ago, and I've like been figuring my own role out, and I could feel the kind of some confusion within the team and like feeling some angst. That's why I like talk about things that are real for me right now. And so there's RACI is one part of it. The other part of it is looking at your team and their capabilities. How do I tap into their skills to make sure that I'm pairing the right skill with the right opportunity, if that makes sense? And and communicating it out first with the leadership team, first with that one-on-one with that person, and then broader with the leadership team, and then broader with an all hands.
Okay, perfect. So this goes right into that a little bit more. So how do you implement a RACI chart within a feature delivery team instead of a project team? Because it sounds like you're using RACI to kind of figure out who would be best for this project to kind of create the roles and responsibilities around a team. But how would you do that within a feature team versus a project team? I don't know how that's set up at Indeed, to be honest.
So it was in a feature team versus I feel like we would use the format in the same way, honestly, whether it's a feature or a large-scale project, defining who the key players are and how they engage and who's going to be responsible for what.
Pretty much the same.
I would use the same approach. What's great about it, it is a framework that works for any scale problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Can you talk about a specific situation that was challenging for you or your team, what you did, and what changed after implementing some of the things you talked about?
Yeah. So a specific challenge. I think one of the big challenges up front we had was co-location. I think that like really hurt us. Like half of the designers were in one location, the other was in another. And I think the challenge was that it would break down our communication lines. And the way we mitigated that was we had an offsite just to kind of build up some team bonding around it and get to know each other on a more personal level. And then what we did was we improved our communication. So we increased like Slack, Google Docs to async, and just had more regular touch points. So we saw that a big pain point was not enough communication touch points, and we resolved that by offsite and then increased touch points.
So by applying those touch points, it helped increase the communication.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dylan asks, how often are you meeting with your peers and direct reports? How do you keep consistent check-ins from being routine and underwhelming?
It's a really great question. So direct reports every week. Peers probably like bi-weekly. Yeah, and then how do we keep it routine? If we can pre-fill in, so we keep a running Google Doc, and if we can come to the table with, here's what I heard, here's what's pressing for me, it makes it a more engaging conversation than coming to the table with like just a blank document. It's like almost like a blank canvas.
Before you meet.
Before you meet,
Okay.
have agenda items. Kind of like, I've heard other folks do this as well, like have all of their docs up during the week and they're populating them as they go. I mean, that's an intense way to do it, but just blocking or block time out before your one-on-ones start, which is what I do, and populate agenda items beforehand to make sure that they're engaging.
Yeah, okay. Do you ever do skip level one-on-ones?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, especially if I'm new to a team. So I just got a content strategy team, and so starting there. And I also have just a general open door policy, like anyone can chat with me.
Like your door's not there. Like you don't have a door.
I don't have a door.
Okay. So last question. I love the idea of shying away from the term design to empower more voices into the process. What words have been effectively used instead?
Ooh, great question. Focusing it back onto the user. And user sometimes feels like a cold word, but again, this is like about what will land for your audience. So will user work best for your company, or consumer, or customer, or whatever that word is?
Human.
Human. Tying it back to those that we serve made it more effective than focusing on design. It's really about how do we best serve others.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's our time. Let's give Kim another round of applause. Thank you so much.